Well, good morning from New York in this particular example, downtown New York, where I'm talking to a friend of mine, Jacob Thampi. Jacob is head, well, I get this right, VP and head of cyber security consulting for QBE North America, obviously based in New York City. And I think we've got quite an interesting lineup here of things that we have discussed in the past. So let's jump straight in. Jacob, briefly, do you want to give us an introduction to you and what your background is from a security perspective, and then we'll jump straight in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Dan, for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the discussion. My experience, I've been in the security industry primarily probably for the past 20 years. I originally got a degree in electrical and computer engineering back in 2004. It's an interesting story because I kind of stumbled into the industry, to be quite honest. When you're a recent grad and looking for whatever work you can get, there's not a lot of thought put into what kind of job you're doing. So I received a phone call from a local company, and never heard of them before because they're kind of small. And they called me in for an interview, and I said, yeah, let's do it. So we scheduled the interview, and it's the following week, and they say, they called me up. I'm sitting there just watching TV at the time. This is again like 2004, and they said, hey, you're supposed to be here for an interview. I said, no, I have it scheduled for tomorrow. I have the time that I have is for tomorrow. And they said, no, well, we have it for today. And I said, oh no, thinking, oh no. And so I said, give me 10 minutes. And I literally told him, give me 10 minutes. In 7 minutes, I was at their office. And one of the reasons why the company intrigued me was they were maybe a mile and a half from where I live, their office. And so I knew if I could tell them like 10 minutes, I literally walk into the door. I quickly threw on my suit and get myself ready, get out there, and just went in. And the lady was like, I just talked to you. Like you literally said you were literally okay with 10 minutes. I said, yeah, that's all I needed. And so after that first interaction, she was like, yeah, I think you're dependable, at least for even though we screwed up on the scheduling piece of it. But they were good to keep us going with me. So then I interviewed, and it was a good. It was supposed to be, the company itself was doing cyber, not just cybersecurity, but they were focused on the cybersecurity work, and almost like a SaaS kind of platform for small to mid-sized banks around the country, mostly in Connecticut, where I was at the time, and in that area. And so they worked with a lot of like these smaller community banks, credit unions. They had a couple of big clients that were kind of out of that space as well, which kind of drove a lot of quite a bit of their revenue. But still, the focus was always there from a small company. So when I started getting there, I kind of worked. It was supposed to be more of a rotational development program, and it didn't really kind of turn into that. But I still had in the probably 2 years, around 2 years that I was there, I probably picked up anywhere from like probably around 5 years worth of experience, just because it's a small organization, right? Small organization. Yeah, and you're working with a lot of great people too, right? The people that have brought this in, people that they're all it was an open kind of workspace, and so the head of engineering was a couple of seats over. So and so I started digging into it, try to, I kind of started out as kind of a support person and helping, talking with our customers and helping with whatever issues that they might be bringing in. Um, and it was a great ride because, like you said, it gave you the opportunity like to kind of really dig in, and it was really my first job, so I was really really curious about what was gonna, what was gonna happen, right? Or like, the way things were working and all those kinds of things. So sure.
So that's really interesting. I knew you would bring this up today, actually, the curiosity factor. That this is something I wanted to jump straight into. Do you think that is almost like a fundamental personality trait that we need in our industry? I've kind of, that's a leading question, of course, but what's your thought around it?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a critical kind of quality to have, because it it helps it puts you in that foundational mindset to really dig into what you're doing, right? And so anything that I kind of progress into, it has to be kind of something that it's not about the interest there. It's just about unpacking why we do the way we do it, right?
Mm.
Um, because then you're looking at it from, and this goes for anything. It doesn't even have to be cyber, right? You can look at a process and say, you can look at it from end to end and be like, well, why do we do this as part of this? Why do we do that as part of this, right? Because then you look at it and you're like, there's a real inefficiency, kind of, right? Or there, when you look at something and then you get that feedback, there's a real inefficiency. And I'll give you a good story. One of the companies that I went to after this other cybersecurity kind of startup company, I went to a chemical company, and they were very big on the practice of process excellence. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but it's more around it was, lean, Six Sigma, kind of that mentality with that companies like GE kind of pioneered in the past. And so they were very big on looking at, and the reason why I got into it is because they picked me to run the system that manages the work for that, right? And so people can go in there and enter, oh, I see this process and I think it could be better. So then they kick off something where they can look at a process and be like, all right, whatever it is. And they said, okay, we can save X amount of hours, we can save X amount of money, we can save headcount, whatever it is, people can find different things. And so I always thought, oh, that's a good thing to invest in, because as you grow as a company, like, think about the amount of things that you just do, not thinking from a um, efficiency standpoint or doing it the right way. You're just kind of doing it just to do it, right? And then it creates so much waste, like, as
Yeah,
time goes on,
yeah.
right? And so that's the way I've always thought about things, and I've always worked in a kind of a lean kind of environment in every place I've been. So and typically my first thought is not to, like, okay, we need more people to kind of address this. What we really need is, let's really figure out what we're trying to solve here first, right? And then we can kind of put um, put the different designs together on how we're going to make it work, right? And so that's what I instill. Um, when I have a few folks that work for me now, and they're great. They're great folks because they love to kind of fit, they'll come up to me with a problem. They'll said, hey, here's what, we think we were talking about this and do. I said, that's interesting. What do we want to do about it? I said,
Put it back to
because
them.
yeah, I said, and they're like, oh, we can probably put together a process for this. I said, go for it, and let's talk through it. And so they'll start off with one iteration of it, and then they'll bring in additional people, or one person will kind of take the lead on it, and then they'll bring in the addition everybody else from the team. They'll bring me in, and we'll start talking through it, and then we'll iterate, and we'll say, okay, well, what about this if this is happening? And none of it comes out of a place of like, this is a bad idea, this is dumb, or anything like that. It comes out of a genuine place of, we know there's a problem that exists, everybody agrees, and then we all want to fix it and do it, and that's been great feedback. I pride myself on getting feedback where the team gives me feedback around, like, what do I do better, and that's what they appreciate. They said, you let us kind of go out and do what you want to, and I said, well, I'm trying to get out that curiosity that I'm always interested in, right? Of problem solving and things of that nature, to kind of instill it in them and make it work for them.
But that's interesting, Jake, because one of the things that I picked up on one of our coffees was there's that mentality in cybersecurity, right? And I want to draw two dimensions here. One is that everything's always, no, I exaggerate, but there is a sense that everything always is escalated up for a decision. And I really love that, the fact that you bounce it back down and say, well, what do you think? And that obviously has this huge benefit of embodying decision making and those skills within there. But also there's this lateral kind of thing as well, which is, ever since I first met you, you were of that mind that you follow the business process, as opposed to, as we would say, scan everything from A through Z, right? So there's this kind of lattice I'm forming in my brain here about how you operate, which I think is really valuable to share. And what are the lessons that you've learned about what makes that, why is that so valuable? How do your colleagues benefit from that? And how does that work in the cybersecurity model?
It's so valuable because, I think you uncover so much, because I think sometimes we like to stick to a script, right? And it's that, I don't mean this in a negative connotation, where we sometimes might want to stick our head in the sand and, like, not think about it. And but it's also kind of, it's like, this is how we're doing it, we're just gonna stick with it, and why do we need to rock the boat? It's working, and no need to. And I said, well, it's like, yeah, that might be true, but like, we could be freeing up so much time too, right? And then,
No one talks about that, do they, in cyber? It's always
yeah, it's
not free up.
yeah, it's amazing to me, because sometimes, and I think that sometimes leads certain people to think, well, then, that's that's going to affect my job. That means I'm not going to do something. I said, not really. That's not true at all. Because I think people, like, you get ahead by looking at what you bring to the table, and I think when people see that you're a person that's looking to improve on a bit, I don't think anybody's going to get rid of you. First of all, they'll make sure that you're the type of person that they want to keep, because just because your job is now being improved, right? I can personally tell you, I look at something and I say, in the 20 years I've been doing this, not once have I ever looked at something and say, well, I'm afraid for my job, because if I make this better, then I'm going to lose it. Not once in my career have I ever run across that.
I must ask another question that goes
Yeah.
in tandem with that, which is, therefore, do you think, Jacob, that people are kind of obsessed with doing more and more complexity and just chewing through stuff? And that is one of the fundamental problems of our industry, in that find more, do more, display more, aggregate more, integrate more, suck it all in, process it more. Is this mentality of complexity killing the very essence of what we're trying to get at, do you think, based on that? Or
I think there's, partially. I think that, we're trying to find I would probably say the shortest path to a solution sometimes, and sometimes the shortest path may not be the right path either, right? So we might say, okay, because I can understand people are coming up against deadlines, and sometimes tight deadlines, and you have a lot on your plate, and so sometimes that ability to just get it done also kind of plays a part in it. So as long as we find something done, and then that's it, right? Because I've seen it very often, where if we just step back and we think about problems the right way, and if it goes back to to me, it's the diversity of thought around people that can bring different you know, you want to bring in a team of people to look at things, right? And to challenge you and say why this might work or not work. And it's not just about, hey, look, I created this awesome thing. We should like start doing it right away. But then, you know, everybody, there's a piece that everybody has to play in it, right? I mean, in our space, we deal a lot with, even though we're in cyber, we deal a lot with nowadays privacy, legal, compliance, risk, space, and everybody has a part to play, and it's always around. I think we can create something, but and all those areas are partners for us. But so I think sometimes the complexity comes out of, okay, now we got to kind of satisfy the needs of a lot of different areas. But I think we don't need to. Yeah, I don't think we need to look at it like that. I think we can still bring them along for the ride where we're still kind of they're getting something out of it, and not, you know, not just for us, because I think that partnership is very key. That collaboration is very key.
Now, that's really interesting because when we last spoke, I wrote down something which I thought was so fundamental that you raised, and it's wider parts of the business. And this obviously, you know, comes up every time, but we mentioned that compliance is bleeding into cyber risk, or, you know, sorry, I should say the other way around, actually. Cyber is bleeding into compliance risk. And if you take, they say, the role of the CRO, one of the things I love what you said, Jacob, is the fact that you bring them on the journey and they don't necessarily know the components of that journey as well. So
Right.
isn't there an advantage of this with all these kind of wider touch points in your role and in the cyber advisory roles anyway? Is that a good thing?
Absolutely. I mean, I think especially where we are now, because we're at a point where all those different areas have a part to play in cyber. It's not just the cyber team, right? And if you look at it from more of a broader level, cyber is a kind of a risk area, right? Because we not all the problems are stuff that we can solve, right? And
Correct.
so
Yes.
there's a lot of other areas that need to probably change the way they're doing business, whether that's the business, whether that's other folks within the broader IT space. You know, regardless of what kind of industry you're in. And so we're at this point where I think a lot of those teams are still the kind of trying to figure out a lot of the regulations, even in the US. You know, take for example, New York Department of Financial Services, and that all really came out a few years ago. So it's a key thing for the company I'm, you know, with QBE where I'm right now, because where insurance falls into that financial space, and we have to abide by the rules there. But they have a lot of questions. They're always asking, because it's the laws from NYDFS in relation to cybersecurity are very prescriptive in nature. So they're not really broad in nature. And so when you sit down and have that conversation, and when they ask you the question of, like, you know, what does this mean? Do we have to be concerned around it, or how do we solve it? And you can then start to educate them, right? You're going to be the person that's going to be the person that, yeah, they're going to go out and they're going to look at their own, do their own research, and that's great. But to have that person that they can also rely on, it's not necessarily for the fact of you doing it because you're doing it. You're also creating a partnership. You know, they know that you're being open with them. You're being honest, and that's, like I said, every place that I've been where we've created that kind of partnership has been successful, because you know, different things that we're bringing up could be up for debate, right? And which you can sit there and have that debate with, like, let's just say a business process, right? The way they're doing something, and they may not see it the same way as you do. You know, but then when you bring along, like, let's just say, okay, well, we'll talk to the risk folks and say, let's have that discussion with them and see what, you know, and kind of explain it to them, and they're going to look at it, and they know, you know, the mentality that we have and why we have to be the way we are, because we have the experience to speak to that.
Yes.
And so now you have an ally on your side to help drive that as well, right? It's not a matter of, like, you know, oh, we're raising up something that's going to get us in trouble, or there's going to be more work to be done and things like. No, none of that matters. What matters is we're doing what's right for the business. We're doing what's right for our customers. But if I was a customer of our company, and that's the way I typically look at it, I would want to make sure we're having those kinds of conversations, right? And those debates, and that we're not throwing around like data like it's candy, right? Type situation. So I think that those partnerships are very key to being successful.
Extremely well said, and this is so interesting. This has been a busy day today. I've spoken to a lot of people about a lot of different things, and interesting, a bit of a theme of the day, not that you look at it, but when you reflect, is that word honesty is starting to come out quite a lot. I'm finding it's interesting, is it used to all to be about discovering and figuring stuff out and closing it down, all that. Now it's this problem is so big, it touches so many parts of an organization, that now we have to be very open about security subject. That's something you're trying to close. And the fact is, I want to get your call on this, not necessarily from your organization's perspective, but from a generalist big organization perspective and challenge, which is this. Is it even feasible now to close stuff down fully in terms of risks? Let's not talk about vulnerabilities per se, but risks. And what do you think when you talk to stakeholders in the industry, in the wider industry, what their views are about, do we close everything, or do we manage risk, or do we take different approaches to things now, Jacob? Because this is so very important now, and it is so multidimensional, and with so many stakeholders now being involved, more than we've ever seen. Gosh, that's a big question for you, but where do you think we're going with that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think you can claim everything 100%, being closed, right? I I've always dealt with certain people, in the past where they're not looking to break the rules. They just have that mindset to want to try and break the rules, right? And again, not in a negative way. We run into people like that as well, but there are certain people that I've run across in my past lifetime where I could say, oh yeah, I put up this control of doing something this way, and they said, and they're the type of person to say, well, I'll figure out a way. I'll figure out a way, right? And then they'll figure out a way, and they'll show me, right? They'll say, yeah, you could just do this, and it's and I bypass your control. And I said, absolutely. There's always, you're never going to get to that point where you're 100%. I think you kind of strive to get to that point, obviously, but I've always said, if you want 100% risk, basically disconnect yourself from the internet, and just close yourself off into some hidden space, and then you'll be 100% secure, right? And I don't think that's feasible for most businesses, right?
I want to explore that, because you've just touched on something that's made me really, really, really think. I'm going to make a hypothesis, and this is generic.
Yeah.
The problems we all face as professionals in this area. Organizations are leaky, really leaky. Examples that I personally have seen of late are leaked keys on Postman. And it's not corporate accounts, but it's from corporates. And we've just seen this one or two. We've seen a lot of organizations. It's scary. So they're doing all their cybersecurity. They've got the controls, they've got the SOC, they've got the NOC, they've got everything. They've got red teamers, they've got pen testers. We're doing stuff for them, blah, 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 blah. And some person is leaking stuff because they wanted to use a repo somewhere or publish, blah, blah, blah. It's leaky. We in the olden days, it was always about, everyone's putting things on Dropbox. Okay, so we contain that. But now there's so much. Where does the organization start? Where does the organization end? How do you work with stakeholders who, not necessarily for bad, but just to get things done and look at the path of resistance, Jacob? How do we as security people help them, encourage them, and scoop all this stuff up? I'm asking some very big questions this morning.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, I think, a model of classic model of defense in depth, right? And what you kind of, you know, we do, you know, companies do everything, right? They do, they have filters in place to monitor for bad emails. They have filters in place to prevent you getting to bad sites. You block your, you know, USB ports. You do all these great things, and the fact of the matter is, not any one of those things will prevent things on their own, right? And even when you have that defense in depth model, there are still situations. I mean, I think we moved to that model years ago, where it's not uh, don't don't think that you're not breached. You know, act under the assumptions you might be, and have all the processes in place to support that, right? And so that's very key. Again, I think it boils down to defense in depth. And one of the big pieces of that is we have all, and those are all great things that we need to have, right? And we need to continue to have those things. And a big piece of it is going to continue to be education, right? Awareness to our folks around, but you know, giving them tangible like data to show like this is what happens, right? It's not just about oh, this breach happened here, and it's bad. You know, like, let's just pick it's an insurance company that had a breach, and you know, we need to be prepared too. And it's really like, okay, well, certainly that's part of it, where we have to educate ourselves on what happened with our peers or with others in other parts of the industry on what happened, reflect on that, and then also, you know, and then figure out, okay, what happened. Well, as usual, or majority of the time, it's the weakest link, which is the human, right, in that in that chain. So and we still run across that. That's still the biggest issue. So constantly, but you can't just do training on its own. Then you still have the automated technology in the background. But if you have automated technology, that doesn't mean you just like, oh, we're good. You know, we don't need to worry about it because our antivirus is going to catch everything, right? It's a complete it's a false sense of security, you know, when we think like that. You have to constantly evolve. You have to know what the latest risks are. You have to know who your threat actors are, and you need to constantly be evolving with that space. So I think mature organizations will, you know, kind of not just rest on the fact that they have all these things in place. I think you're kind of just looking ahead just enough to be able to say, okay, we need to think about this or that, whether it's new technology we need to put in, whether it's completely changing, you know, our processes around, and stuff like that happening, right? And so it's again, again, to sum it up based on to your question, is I think it's really that defense and depth, and that's why even with that in place, you're never going to get to 100% risk free of any cyber issues, right? Regardless of what it is.
Absolutely. No, that's it's a damn good answer, and it brings me up to another one, which is I'm trying to think of an analogy, but it's around this. So let's say we deploy some investment, some controls, you know, that kind of, you know, take care of that. So we, you know, we have an education program. Education programs, as you know, have this psychological effect of lasting and for only a certain period of time, and perhaps not being applicable to certain parts of the business, so they don't tune into it, all that kind of stuff, even if we test them. We all hear of the stories of, you know, putting the educational video on 4x play and going walking the dog. Now everyone's at remote, and all these hacks and things, and then they answer it and get through it. The scenarios that I'm kind of thinking through are more about making sure that things are done well. So it strikes me when you say the human element, Jacob, you know, everyone immediately thinks to phishing. At the moment, where my mind is going at the moment is into controls failure. And I know I keep mentioning it, but it is, you know, people have spent all this money, they've spent all this time, they brought in all this amazing skill, they've sweated it, and then we have controls failure. Why?
Yeah.
And it strikes me as a little bit like a chef trying to produce a really fine dish, and they're really good at what they do. And so they've got, you know, their beautiful kitchen, they've got the stainless steel, everything. They've even got the pair of tweezers to put the little pansy on top of their, or you know, bit of samphire on top of their beautiful dish. but they don't check the seasoning. And it's like, how can you deploy a beautiful plate of food in this mixed
Right.
metaphor and not check that it's seasoned correctly? And, you know, oh my goodness, there's no salt in it. It's bland. What's going on? And the same in controls. All this investment, but no one's checking the fundamentals, and they're not there. Where is the root cause of this? Going back to your point of curiosity and following the thread, wrap that back into the conversation.
It is that human element piece of it, right? Because at the end of the day, you can have all the right controls in place, but you know, a good example is more recently is like ChatGPT, right? And we can there's so many examples of people kind of utilizing it with you know, company data, right? Which is a serious risk in itself. And we, you know, you could block it, you can kind of do this, but you know, you can go to any computer, sign in, and type in whatever you want and get a response out of it, right? Yeah, maybe you won't have people submit, you know, upload documents with social security numbers and all this kind of stuff, but I'm sure that's happened, you know. I'm you know, we've seen that human error where data's being sent to places that they didn't really check everything. And I've seen that in past, and files that with hidden columns with sensitive data, and I'm like, oh no, we thought we were only sending this data. Like when you unpack it, you're like, no, there's more stuff in here that shouldn't have been sent. Those types of things, right? And so we're constant. It's a constant. It's a constant education, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to be prepared for something like that to happen, right? And that's, and then you kind of look at it and figure out, okay, what do we need to do better at it? And that doesn't mean you're free from that ever happening again. Far from it. I doubt it, right? If any company has done that, you know, I would love to understand how, because every place that I've been, and I've been with a few different places, the problems always resurface, right? And again, those are more those are more than those kinds of things where you may not have the controls for, but you can kind of have enough in place that you can hold people accountable to make sure that stuff like that's not happening. And I think of some of the places where stuff like that is happened, you're not like getting that message across to people that says, listen, and I'll use the ChatGPT example, is if you want to use it, do not, you know, you can kind of use it in a way that's going to help you, but no way, shape, or form can data be provided, right? Now, whether how would you know, right? How would you know if they do, if they don't? And that's gonna be the I quite honestly, I don't have an answer for that. You're right. I mean, when I think it does move into that kind of educational space where it's even more important that even at the from an organization from the very top, that message has to come across loud and clear. And I think we're, you know, even then we're going to run into rare use cases where things are being used, and we probably just want to continue to have that conversation.
No, I agree with you. It's fascinating because, you know, people's personal and work lives are blending now so much, and the same with personal work systems, using it at home for your kids' homework and using it to solve some problem. And whoops, I've dropped a VPN key in there, you know, and
Yeah.
everything in between. I sometimes use the analogy that, you know, it's ubiquitous as electricity now. You know, your phone's dying, you need to plug it in, USB-C into the wall or into a charger, done. It's there. It's an assumption, right? So we can't lock all this stuff down. Just wrapping up and summarizing here, I think some of the key things that you've brought out here is this education to stakeholders piece, that interestingly, the challenge is now so wide because people, as we've just said, get the job done for whatever intent that they have. Maybe education doesn't stick, or maybe it has a unlasting effect or a short-term effect. But I do love this, that the one thing that when we first met, you really hit me with this about this senior responsibility within cybersecurity of enabling others. And I felt that if ever we're going to solve this, Jacob, is going to be one of those key drivers. In the next minute or so, can you just summarize where is your thinking now taking you for the next 1 to 2 years in terms of how you'll use that enabling others to solve the challenges that are on their way to us, because it's getting really complicated out there?
Yeah, I mean, I look at things, it goes back to, what we kind of touched on earlier around, I've always run a lean kind of shop in the way I've done work. I've never had a very large team in previous organizations, and sometimes it's you kind of have to work with what you have, right?
Yep.
And you might get money for investments and things like that, and which is great. But if you don't have the people, technology is great, but you can throw a whole bunch of technology out there, but if you don't have people to kind of take care of it and run it and stuff like that, then it's sometimes then do you really have the full complement of what you needed done? So, but I think it goes back to things like automation is going to be automation around the way we do business is going to be great, right? Because yes, automation is not going to solve everything, and I certainly don't see it solving everything. I think there's a human element to all these things where we're not at the general AI or the AGI kind of space yet, right? There might be out there, they just haven't released it yet, right? And so it's until then we still, and even then I think we have a huge responsibility to kind of figure out how we can be more efficient in the stuff that we do from our space, right? And that's where that enablement really comes in, where you have to be you can be a problem solver, or they may not know that you're problem solving for them, right? In a certain way, but I'll give an example around a previous organization that I work with, and this was many years ago when we were still kind of early stages of things like single sign-on, right? I'll use that as the technology. So the one of the organizations that I was at, I was tasked with rolling that out, and I went into that project, and it was interesting because I didn't have as hands-on experience with it, so I was kind of we deployed a solution, and then slowly it's one of those things where you slowly add on more applications into being able to utilize it. So then I had to look back and see, okay, how do we get more people onto this, right? And then you start to look at it and you're like, okay, this is where that connecting with people and explaining to them what this really is, because people will look at it and be like, what do you mean? Like, no, I don't want to make any changes to my application. They have that resistance, right? They're like, this other person's gonna like come in and start controlling something of mine, and they'll have that, and that's understandable, right? Because who am I? I just joined the organization. I'm trying to get this thing across the finish line, and so then my thinking kind of shift in the way I kind of communicated what the technology is. I explained, oh, it's single sign-on, and this is what it does. What I explained to them is, hey, listen, right now, what are you doing, right? And you're maintaining an application, correct? And like, what's the number one thing that you get like a help desk request for? They said, oh, password resets. I said, oh, okay, interesting. What if I told you going forward, you don't have to worry about you really don't have to worry about password resets as much anymore? And I said, are you, then they kind of look at you funny and things like that. And then you kind of show it to them. It's like, hey, this, we look at these applications that we set up already in the past, and they're like, this would save me so much time. I don't have to spend half my day figuring out how people are logging into the application, it's not working, password resets and all this kind of stuff. So I said, exactly. So that you have to look at it from that benefit of it, right? And so when you can take that and say, oh yeah, it's a better security control for us because now we have a single ID that we can, in case of any issues, we reset it and it's one password and it's disabled if somebody leaves, and now you don't have to disable it immediately across the board type situation. And people start to see that and like, how do I get my application on this? And then over the years, when I was still kind of in that role, it no longer became me educating. It became me having to keep up with the demand of like, we need to have this installed in there for better user experience. All right.
No, I agree with you.
And so when we shift our thinking to something like that, versus kind of, I don't think people resonate as much with, well, it absolutely is. It's a compliance thing. It has to be a compliance thing. It has to be a control thing that we do and all this kind of stuff. I think we deliver the message in a different way, right? And it could be things like, hey, listen, what if you're our customer and you saw this? How would you react to this, right? Put yourselves in a customer's shoes, and you were the customer. How would you think that there's certain companies that I've seen in the past, and I've known I'm not talking about companies that I've been with been with directly, but you speaking with other people, you can see it. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I want to really work with that, even though they may have a sense of like of security based on their name or whatever, right? And so I'm very cautious, not cautious. It's more about very deliberate about the message that you want to deliver, and not like pound the desk. So you have to do this kind of situation, but you can kind of explain it in a way that people understand, and people will be willing to work with you to say, yeah, you're absolutely right. Nobody wants to be caught up in a ransomware attack where they can't access their files and do their work anymore and things like that, right? And so you explain like, this is what we're doing to get it better, and this is where it might be an impact. But here's what we're doing, hopefully, to kind of make it better for folks, right?
No,
And that might not be the same message in every situation, but I think we as security professionals we don't have to, again, we really can get the message across in a way that I think people will be appreciative of that and want to work with us.
So to summarize, I think that kind of that careful messaging, building a lean, efficient organization where you can escalate back down and encourage and enable others, that enablement with a big slice of curiosity is definitely got to be the summary of the day. Jacob Thampi, VP and Head of Cyber Security Consulting at QBE North America. Fascinating as always. I'm very grateful for your time. Thank you very much indeed.
I appreciate it, Dan. Thank you for having me. It was a great discussion. So great questions.
Thank you.